It is now 10:02 a.m., and I recognize that a quorum of the board is present. The Pension Review Board will come to order. Mr. Burnham, please call the roll of the members.
Chair Stephanie Leiby.
Present.
Vice Chair Keith Brainerd.
Here.
Marcia Dush.
Here.
Christopher Gonzalez.
Here.
Daniel Harper.
Here.
Roy Rodriguez.
Here.
Christopher Zook.
Here.
Since there are no absent members today, there'll be no motion related to absentee members. First up on our agenda would be administrative items. We will consider and take possible action to approve minutes from the December 4th, 2024 board meetings. Members have received the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
I move.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mrs. Dush and seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Is there any discussion from the board? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved as circulated. Next, we'll walk through some of our committee assignments. With Mr. Rodriguez's recent placement on the board, we are going to update the composition of the Education Committee and place Mr. Rodriguez on that committee. All other committee assignments will remain same for the ongoing year. Next is the election of our vice chair. Since this is the first meeting of 2025, the board bylaws require that we elect a vice chair. The chair recognizes Vice Chair Brainerd for his dedicated service as Vice Chair of the Pension Review Board. At this time, the chair will call for nominations for the position of Vice Chair for the year 2025. Is there any nominations from the board members?
I nominate Mr. Brainerd.
Second.
Any discussion from the board? Very well. The nomination for vice chair is for Mr. Brainerd to continue serving in that role. All those in favor of electing Mr. Brainerd say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and Mr. Brainerd is elected as vice chair for 2025. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll now accept public comments. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience, either in person or virtually, who has comments that they'd like to present to the board at this time? And just as a reminder, we'll have public comments now, and then if there's any specific agenda item that you would like to speak on, you're welcome to provide public comments at that time as well. Having no public comments, I'll now turn the meeting over to Mr. Brainerd to walk us through the actuarial committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask David Fee, the PRB staff actuary, and Anika Long to present item 5A. Ms. Long is the actuarial intern that has been serving the board, and we look forward to hearing from her. Welcome, Mr. Fee and Ms. Long.
So I'm David Fee, the Senior Actuary at the Pension Review Board, here to present item 5A, the AV report and FSRP report. So today we'll go over changes since the December board meeting. That will include system news, new happenings for a few systems, new mortality tables that were just published in May for public pension systems, major assumption changes, so systems that changed expected return and payroll growth assumptions. We'll go over valuation averages and timing broken down by asset size, frequency, and plan status. For funding progress, we'll look at how key counts and averages have moved over time. For system overview, we'll review key metrics by system type. And then we'll look at a list of systems with outlier statistics, such as the longest funding periods and lowest funded ratios. Then for the FSRP report, we'll look at systems that moved to a different risk category since December, and a full list of systems for each risk category. So for Texas Public Pension System news, Amarillo Fire removed their second tier and also granted ad hoc COLA to retirees. I do believe these will be popular benefit enhancements that we'll see from other systems as they get to 15-year funding periods in the future. So that will include restoring benefits that were previously reduced and COLAs for retirees who have lost purchasing power. For Dallas employees, they completed their FSRP. Galveston employees, they increased their benefit multiplier and their flat dollar cap, and while remaining under a 15-year funding period. So while I would prefer systems remove these flat dollar caps altogether, it's certainly a good start to raise them periodically. Galveston Fire, the members and the city both increased contribution rates by 1.5%, and that brought their funding period below the 30-year threshold. Next slide. For Houston MTA non-union, if you remember when we were developing lump sum guidance, there was one system that was using mortality from 1971 when lifespans were artificially shortened by fumes from green shag carpeting. And I'm happy to say that they have updated their assumptions according to our guidance. And we've also heard from University Health that they are in the process of updating their lump sum assumptions to correspond to our guidance.
Mr. Fee, members, I want to recognize Mr. Fee. He identified this as basically an actuarial inequity that was happening in the state, and he brought it to the board's attention. And as far as I know, this is the first plan to make changes in response to the information that the staff has brought to us, and we hope it's the first of many, but you're to be commended for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we identified 12 systems that were offering complete lump sum cash outs, and at that time 3 were already, as far as the assumptions, meeting our guidance, and it looks like we have 2 more, so we're up to 5 out of 12 that are meeting the guidance. For Midland Fire, they did complete their FSRP. We didn't show that on this page, but they have completed the FSRP in the last week. Nacogdoches County Hospital District may get some funding in the near future. They are researching potential tax and bond initiatives. Wichita Falls Fire, we know the city provided a one-time $1 million contribution as well as ongoing increase of 1% of pay contributions. And they are considering further changes to be able to satisfy the FSRP by January 1st. And we're hoping that will include increasing the flat dollar cap if they can work that in. Next slide. So we do have new mortality tables that came out in May, and so we're going to go over a comparison of the new 2016 pub mortality tables to 2010 pub mortality tables. So you may recall the 1993 movie Groundhog Day, where the character Ned Ryerson says, "I have friends who live and die by the actuarial tables," and I say, "Hey, it's all one big crapshoot anywho." And Ned was right. If you're going person by person, lifespans are difficult to predict. But in large groups, we can get a pretty good idea about average lifespans. But they still need to be updated, once or twice per decade. So here's our latest update. So on the next slide. So here we're showing tables for ages 65, 75, and 85 by gender and split between teachers, safety, and general employees. So in these charts, you'll see that liabilities will decrease for teachers and general employees, but increase for firefighters and police officers. But these numbers assume payments for the life of the member only. When we consider that that most safety pension plans offer joint and survivor benefits that cover the spouse as well, there should be savings from their opposite gender spouses that will lower these effects substantially. So if there's no questions for the next 3 slides, I'm going to turn it over to our actuarial intern, Annika, who has been with us for the fall, spring, and now summer semesters, and just passed her first actuarial exam. So this is her first time presenting to you, so try and look as intimidating as possible.
Congratulations, Ms. Long.
Thank you. Good
Welcome.
morning. My name is Annika Leong, the actuarial intern, here to present significant economic assumptions, valuation timing, and valuation averages. So among the actuarial valuation reports received since the December 4th, 2024 board meeting, Temple Fire, Tesers, and University Medical Center changed their discount rate and/or payroll growth rate assumptions. These assumptions directly influence the valuation of liabilities and the projection of future contributions. On average, a Texas public pension system's liability will increase by 3% for every 25 basis point decrease in the discount rate. An increased payroll growth rate will lead to a reduced funding period. Temple Fire adjusted its payroll growth rate from 3.75% to 4.25% and its discount rate from 7.75% to 7.3%, and went from having one of the highest discount rates in Texas to closer to average, while remaining one of the highest payroll growth rates, which appears reasonable based on the system's actual payroll growth history and the recent growth of the city population. Tesers decreased their discount rate from 7.5% to 7.25% and will further decrease to 7% based on the recently passed Senate Bill 2065. And University Medical Center increased their discount rate assumption from 4% to 5%, which is well below average both before and after the increase. In addition, El Paso Police Pension Fund, El Paso Firemen's Pension Fund, and El Paso Firemen's and Policemen's Pension Staff Plan reduced their discount rate from 7.75% to 7.5%, thereby decreasing the number of systems with a discount rate over 7.5% from 8 systems to now 4 systems. All 3 El Paso systems voted to reduce their discount rate assumption to 7.5% for the next valuation. Next slide, please. Among the 66 systems performing annual valuations, the average time to reach the PRB from the valuation date to the date we receive it is 7 months. The average span since their last valuation is 1.25 years, with the longest gap being 2 years. And for the 40 systems performing biannual valuations, the average time to reach the PRB is 9 months. The average span since their last valuation is 1.92 years, with the longest gap being 2.75 years. As you can see, the average span since the last valuation is significantly longer for systems that perform biannual valuations. What we tend to see when they become subject to an FSRP is that they feel the need to perform an updated valuation before evaluating potential corrective actions, rather than rely on what could be considered outdated information. When it comes to asset size, the larger systems with over $100 million in assets tend to do annual valuations, with 82% that do annual and 18% that do biannual. Many of the smaller systems with less than $100 million in assets elect to perform biannual valuations, likely to reduce administrative expenses. Since the lowest funded systems tend to be smaller systems, only 37% of systems who are funded under 65% conduct annual valuations, while 72% of systems funded over 65% are annual. From the data, 72 systems used a valuation date around December 31st or January 1st, indicating a preference for year-end or start-of-year valuations. Since the majority of systems used a December 31st and January 1st valuation date, and the average time to reach the PRB is 7 to 9 months, we tend to receive the most valuation reports over the summer and early fall months. This aligns with what we see in the data, with the 12 systems conducting valuations around September 30th or October 1st, and the remaining systems reporting in either June 30th or July 1st and August 31st and September 1st, or some other date that aligns with a different fiscal year or administrative preferences. Next slide, please.
Excuse me. Before you move from that slide, could one of you please make any observations you want about this? Particularly, is anything on here that concerns you or troubles you?
I wouldn't go so far as troubling. The couple things you'll notice is that there was one biennial system that the longest span was 2.75 years, which is quite a long time. We did receive that valuation report in the last week since these materials were produced, so I think that number would be a little shorter, maybe 2.25 years now. And the other thing we notice is that I think we already touched on is that for systems subject to an FSRP that use biennial valuations, what tends to happen is they don't want to make decisions based on outdated information, and so they feel the need to do evaluation as quickly as possible and then try and complete the FSRP. So we have one system now where the city has just hired an actuary to validate the evaluation that was just done by the system. And so the city will get those results in early August, and the FSRP is due September 1st. So that would be, I think, the main concern is just, for systems subject to an FSRP, the biennial evaluations tend to be, make it difficult to get the FSRPs done in time.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So provided is a snapshot of the valuation averages for currently active and frozen or closed plans. For active plans, the average age is 41.1, years of service is 10.9, and the discount rate is 7.1%, and payroll growth rate is 3.6% in fast-growing cities and 2.9% in others. In contrast, our frozen and closed plans average age is 53.9, years of service is 22.4, discount rate is 6.5%, and the payroll growth is 0%. As you can see, the membership for frozen and closed plans are on average much closer to retirement age, which results in more conservative investments and a lower expected return. Now I will be turning it back over to David. If there are no more questions.
Thank you very much.
So now we'll look at funding progress over the last 2 years.
Marcia, did you have a question?
I did. As we consider things for the next legislative session and thinking about FSRP rules, things like that, would it be advisable to have staff consider whether or not we make a request that as a plan gets tagged as being at risk for an FSRP, that they are then required to do an annual valuation? I'm not saying this, but the thought came to me as we looked through that slide that maybe we should consider that going forward.
I mean, that's certainly something that we could look at because we are due to review the FSRP rules in 2026 anyway. And that could result in identifying kind of legislative changes too. So, but that's something we can look at.
Thank you.
What we currently do is when a system becomes at risk, we point out that it would be in their best interest to finish their evaluation report in as timely a manner as possible to give them as much time as possible to work on their FSRP.
In those situations, are they holding back evaluation that they've actually completed in order to do the next one? I mean, do they have evaluation that they're just not sending to us?
No, I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
Other questions? Mr. Fee, please.
So for funding progress, this shows the last 2 years. You can see the board meeting dates beneath each bar and what the average expected return was on that date. And so you can see a decreasing trend over the board meeting dates until you get to today. We did have one system that increased from 4% to 5%. And while that's still a fairly low expected return, they did ruin our trend line. So we do have 2 lines on this chart. The top one is our aggregate funded ratio, where TRS and ERS make up 2/3 of the assets and liabilities. And on that basis, we're around 79% funded. And then the line on the bottom is our average funded ratio, where ERS and TRS just make 1/100th of the average, just like every other system. And on that basis, it's closer to 75% funded. Now looking at the bars, the count of systems with over a 30-year funding period continues to decrease. We had 28 systems in June of 23, and we're down to 21 systems today. And then the count of systems below our 2040 target of 15-year funding period continues to increase. So we had 33 such systems 2 years ago, and we're up to 38 systems today. Next slide. So this is our system overview. You can see that the median returns are the same as they were in the previous board meeting. I will point out that for the 810 systems, we're showing 6.5, but if we were only showing for ongoing active accruing plans, the number would be 6.75. For median funding period, we are showing improvement.
Mr. Fee, one moment, please. Ms. Dush.
Just a comment about the median returns. Again, and I know we'll discuss this a little later when we talk about investments, but I find it peculiar that the TELFRA median return is 7.25, which is greater than the statewide funds. The TELFRA funds are much more mature, much smaller, do not have the in-house professional investment capabilities that the statewide funds have. Again, my concern is whether or not the TELFRA funds are using a good expected rate of return on assets in their valuation. It just seems peculiar that it's in this chart that it's higher than the statewide fund.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's been the case for quite a while,
Yeah.
although it has come down a little bit.
It's improving, but
there still is this gap. And one consequence of it is that we're probably not seeing the real condition of these plans when they're using a what I consider to be an inflated expected return assumption.
and the long-term, issue there is that they will generate losses, which continue to increase the unfunded liabilities, essentially pushing the cost of current benefits to future generations of stakeholders, both members and taxpayers.
Chair Levy.
Mr. Zook, please.
Peculiar is a great word, and we will talk more and have some fun data to show in the investment committee section to talk about how peculiar it really is. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions right now? Mr. Fee?
Looking at the median funding periods, we did see improvement for TELFRA. I think they were 27 the last board meeting. We're showing 26 today. And we're also showing improvement for municipal, but that's mainly due to a change at the PRB in how we're displaying results for the Houston systems. So in the past, a system like Houston Police, we were showing a 23-year funding period, and now we're showing 12. 23 was based on what was shown in their valuation report, based on the expected contributions, based on if the contributions equaled what the actual determined contribution was. What the city's actually been contributing is more than that actually determined contribution, and so we're showing 12 to reflect those increased contributions. Now looking at the expected returns box, you can see statewide systems tend to be around 7%. TELFRA systems and municipal systems tend to be between 7 and 7.5%, and 810 systems are generally below 7%. Looking at funding periods, what jumps out at me is 60% of TELFRA systems are now below a 30-year funding period threshold, and 80% of municipal systems. Looking at 810 systems, it's all but one system that are below that 30-year funding period. Then when we look at funded ratios, you can see that one dark bar for TELFRA showing that over half of the systems are below the 65% funded ratio threshold. And that's because it takes time, even though they're improving their funding periods, it takes time for that to translate to the funded ratio. For a system like Midland Fire that just had a really big cash infusion of $54 million, that increases the funded ratio right away. But when it's just a 1 or 2% increase in payroll contributions going forward, that takes a while to show up in the funded ratio.
Mr. Fee, one moment. Just to make a macro level observation here, this is good news. These figures, the average expected return is going down, the average funding period is going down, and the average funded ratio that for the most part is going up is good news. You agree with that?
Yes, and we'll go over trends on the next slide that show that to a greater extent.
Thank you.
So next slide. So this is the 6-year trend. So we look at the most recent valuation report and what the valuation report looked like 6 years prior. And on that basis, the average expected returns are decreasing across the board. the funding periods are, what we'd want to see is the funding period decreasing by 6 years. And we do see greater than that for both statewide and TELFRA. And then for funded ratio, we want to see them increasing, and we see that for most systems other than municipal. For expected return decrease, you can see the majority of each system did decrease their expected returns. And so one thing I'd point out is, decreasing the funding period along with decreasing the expected returns is, especially a good sign to see. For funding period improvement, almost 80% of TELFRA has improved their funding period over the last 6 years, with more than a third improving by more than 10 years. But when you look at the funded ratio improvement, over half of TELFRA municipal actually decreased their funded ratio, and again, that's not unexpected. Go to the next slide. So these are systems with funding periods greater than 40 years. TESR's at the top. Through Senate Bill 2065, we know that they now have a 30-year funding plan. Nacogdoches County Hospital, we know they're researching revenue sources. Midland Fire has now completed their FSRP. Sweetwater Fire is working on their FSRP. Texarkana Fire is not yet subject. Dallas Police and Fire, the city is funding according to previous benefit level, and there's pending litigation regarding that system. Marshall Fire is working on their FSRP. Dallas employees completed their FSRP. Austin Fire, through House Bill 2802, did establish a 30-year funding plan. And then Harlingen Fire has not yet triggered an FSRP. So we'll go to the next slide. So these systems have both a low funded ratio and a long funding period compared to the FSRP thresholds. So as a reminder, after September 1st, any valuation report that shows a funded ratio less than 65% and a funding period greater than 30 years, if both those are true, then that's going to trigger an FSRP immediately. In the past, it used to take consecutive valuations to trigger an FSRP, but if those conditions are met where you're on the wrong side of both thresholds, it will be an immediate trigger. So the top 5 systems on this slide, all have greater than 40 years, so we just discussed them on the previous slide. So next is Wichita Falls Fire, which is working on their FSRP that's due in January. The next 3, Greenville Fire, Orange Fire, and San Angelo Fire, are not yet subject to FSRPs. Plainview Fire is our lone remaining legacy FSRP. And then Beaumont Fire is working on their FSRP, and they are here. I think both the board chair and a representative from the city will be here to speak later. And San Benito Fire is not yet subject to an FSRP.
May I ask a question? David, with the ones that have no plan expected because they haven't triggered an FSRP, are you in contact with these plans and essentially putting them on notice of their situation?
As soon as the system becomes at risk, so as soon as the system breaches the 30-year funding period, we do send them a letter explaining that they're at risk and what would make them subject to an FSRP, and remind them that it would be in their best interest to do a timely valuation report so that they have time in case that valuation report does trigger an FSRP. And then, as far as whether there's communication beyond that, it's really up to whether the system wants that. But one of the systems, Harlingen Fire, the board chair is here today.
Great, thank you.
So these are systems with fund exhaustion years. So based on current contribution levels, assets are projected to be depleted prior to paying all promised benefits. So the 4 on the left were all subject to FSRPs, although Midland Fire and Dallas employees have completed theirs, and Sweetwater and Wichita Falls are working on theirs. The other 3 in the middle, TESR's, Longview, and Austin, all have made changes that should satisfy that. So the 3 on the right, we know they have fund exhaustion years, but they don't properly report it in their disclosures, but they do disclose a blended rate that gives us a clue as to what that exhaustion year is. So systems with fund exhaustion dates, they use their expected return until the fund exhaustion year, and then they use the municipal bond rates thereafter. So we know that a system like San Angelo Fire with a rate near 7%, that fund exhaustion year would have to be well into the future. So they do belong on the right side of the page. But looking at Nacogdoches with a very low blended rate, we would know that that fund exhaustion year would have to be very, very soon, and they probably belong all the way on the left-hand side of the page. Next slide. So these are systems with funded ratios below 50%, as well as retiree funded ratios below 100%. You have heard me say many times that it's distressing to see a pension system that doesn't have enough assets to pay what retired members are owed. So it's at first glance a bit scary to see so many systems on this slide, but the good news is that most of these systems have an asterisk, and that asterisk signifies a 30-year funding period or less. And so there's only 5 systems highlighted that don't meet that. Marshall Fire, of course, is subject to an FSRP, as well as Dallas Police and Fire. Greenville Fire is at risk of an FSRP. Plainview Fire, again, is our legacy. And then Midland Fire has completed theirs. On the next slide, these are more systems that are below that 100% retiree funded ratio threshold. And again, many of them do have that asterisk, but there are 3 highlighted: Wichita Falls Fire, Sweetwater Fire, and Beaumont Fire, and they are all subject to FSRPs.
Mr. Fee, can I interrupt you for a moment? And could we go back to the systems with fund exhaustion year? And you pointed out Nacogdoches. My understanding is that y'all have been in touch with Nacogdoches. And as you said, their projected exhaustion date is a lot closer to 2040 than it is to 2100. Did I understand correctly that they right now have 0 money going into the fund in terms of contributions?
That's correct.
So everything they're paying out is right against the corpus of the fund, and they're relying solely on investment performance in order to increase the size of the pot.
Yes.
But my understanding also is that they're working on generating some revenue source, which you referenced earlier in your remarks.
Yes, they're definitely working on it. We don't have any definitive movement on it yet.
Thank you. Other questions, comments before we move on to FSRP updates?
Go to the next slide. So these are all our status changes since the last board meeting. Dallas employees completed their FSRP. We also know now that Midland Fire has completed theirs. San Angelo Fire did go above the 30-year funding period, so they're now at risk. Galveston Fire is now below 30 years, so they're no longer on any list. Fort Worth employees used to be a legacy FSRP, but they're now below 30 years and are not on any list. They're a completed FSRP. And so Dallas employees in Fort Worth are now removed. So I think looking at systems immediately subject on the next slide, we've basically discussed all of these on previous slides. I'm certainly open to discussing any of them if you have any questions, but I think we've pretty much discussed all their statuses.
Comments or questions on any of these systems immediately subject to the FSRP? Please.
Okay. And then systems at risk on the next slide. All these systems, if they have one more valuation report that's above 30-year funding period, they would trigger an FSRP. We do know that Austin Fire, of course, has the legislation, and so they would not be expected to trigger an FSRP.
So with regard to Austin Fire, is it just a matter of getting a new valuation?
Right. We generally leave these lists based on what the valuation reports we've received, but we'll comment if we know something that's coming.
So we know they're going off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the next slide, there's 2 systems, Laredo and Longview Fire, that are both on track to be fully funded by September 1st, 2055. So they technically had a valuation report showing a funding period greater than 30, but they are not, currently at risk. And we have 1 remaining legacy FSRP of Plainview on the next slide. And that's it. If there's no questions, that concludes my remarks.
I do have a question going back to the at-risk page. Just a question about Texarkana. It's a peculiar series of valuation results. They go from a 58% or 58-year amortization down to 27 and 21, and then up to infinite in 23. Do you have any idea why they have such a strange set of results?
Actually, we did do a slide on that a few board meetings ago when this valuation report came through, because it is an odd situation. But as you can see, they have compared to a lot of systems, they have a fairly high funded ratio of 81%. And so it just becomes, a strange issue when most of our systems are funding, when they're funding toward their benefit, a lot of the funds are going to an unfunded liability, and a little bit of the funds are going toward the normal cost. And this is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, and it just leads to very large changes in the funding period, even though it might be a very small necessary change and contribution to fix it.
Is it a very small active group?
I don't remember the specifics anymore.
All right,
but,
it just struck me as funny.
But I think it's a situation where it's an infinite funding period, but if they did need to make a fix, I don't think it would be as difficult to fix as, many of our other infinite systems.
Right,
As you can see, it's 81% funded ratio.
Yeah.
Last chance for now to ask questions of the actuarial team. Mr. Fee, Ms. Long, thank you very much. And we're going to hear from folks in Beaumont. I'm going to ask Mr. Luke Skelton, who is with the City of Beaumont, to come forward. Mr. Skelton, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Luke Skelton. I'm the chair of the Beaumont Firemen's Relief and Retirement Fund.
Mr. Skelton, one moment, please. I want to be sure that your colleague in Beaumont is here. Is there anyone else here on the line from the City of Beaumont? If so, please unmute your mic and make yourself known.
My name is Troy Reed. I'm the city attorney for the City of Beaumont.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. So we're going to hear from Mr. Skelton first, and we'll turn to you after he's made his remarks.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Skelton, please.
Good morning. Since I'm here to update since I represented to y'all in February, we have made progress. It has been slow. The city is still operating without a CFO, which leaves us one member short to our board. We were able to meet with the city on June the 12th to present the actuarial study with 3 funding options that we have sent to Mr. David with the PRB. After we presented, we asked for ongoing updates. Again, that was June the 12th when before we were able to schedule a meeting with the city. We received their proposal based off that presentation this past Tuesday, and it was Tuesday evening. So we only had one day to send it to our actuary for him to review it. Based off that proposal, the actuary determined that if some modifications were made, that it would get us to the 30-year funding period. Again, that was just determined yesterday, being that they just now sent us that proposal. So, all the correspondence that we have between us and the city has been forwarded to Mr. Fee. So that's where we stand right now.
So the city sent you a proposal, and you turned it right around and handed it to your actuary.
Yes, sir.
And the actuary reported that it would bring you all back into compliance.
If there were some modifications made as far as how money is put in, as opposed to lump sums versus with injected with regular payroll, things like that.
Okay.
So.
Is that the end of your prepared remarks? For
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Reed, you care to comment?
I'm here to answer any questions that the board may have. The city, when we appeared last, I believe February, we did say that we would be speaking, including the pension in our budget discussions. They were scheduled for June 12th. Um, I thought the meeting went well. Based on that, we originally were planning to pay for just the vacant positions that the city added, after discussing it with our finance team. And I just kind of want to make a footnote here. Although we don't have a named CFO, we do have those duties being covered. We have an assistant CFO. We did reach out to the pension and ask if they wanted that individual to sit on the board. And they said that that would not comply with their bylaws, but the city is not operating in a deficit, and we don't believe that the absence of being able to fill that position is any way hindered our ability to reach an agreement for the pension board. That being said, we have determined that, the increased vacancies based on retirements, that we are willing to fund all vacant grade 1 positions on September 30th. And we have injected into our budget, which is scheduled to be presented to council for approval on September 16th. That's the day that it'll actually be on the agenda to be approved. It'll actually be presented in August, the draft budget in August for their consideration to make changes and have discussion will be in early August. But the approval date is September 16th for us to pay for any and all vacant positions for grade 1 positions in the fire department. Currently, that number is at 25. If we have more people retire, but between now and that time, we're also prepared to increase that contribution based on whatever that dollar amount translates to however many vacancies are available on September 30th of 2025. That's the city manager is also prepared to do that as an ongoing contribution. So if they're vacant, if we need to continue to contribute to vacancies, we're willing to do that as well. The budget that's being proposed will have a 2% increase to the pension. The goal is that once we have a solid contract in place to know what the wages and wage increases will be, we'll be able to determine whether or not there are additional dollars to increase the city's contribution from 22% to maybe 23 or 23.5, which was proposed by the actuary.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. And I'm asking both you and Mr. Skelton, it sounds like we have an agreement.
I thought we did. I know that Mr. Skelton said that he wanted to make sure that the plan would align with the actuary study, and that's why we couldn't submit a joint letter. But that is what we're on track to do. And I understand if he's hesitant to commit to anything until after either the budget or the fire contract is settled. But the city's committed to doing the things that we've outlined in our letter.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Skelton?
Yes, sir. Our only reservation is the board. It has to line up with what the actuary states that it needs to line up. So obviously, if some modifications need to be made based off of their proposal, what the actuarial says we need to modify, then that's what we need to do.
It sounds like both parties are operating in good faith, and we're moving closer to an agreement if
Yes,
it
sir.
has not been signed.
Very optimistic.
And Ms. Reed, I understood you to say that the Beaumont City Council will take a vote in mid-August?
No, sir. The vote will occur September 16th for the budget. The actual budget itself will be presented in early August to them, but I'm not anticipating that the 2% proposed increase to the pension will be a strong step fast. Our council, especially our mayor, has participated in these discussions before, and they understand the need for it. That being said, the package that council was interested in presenting to the fire union already included a 2% increase to the pension. So that's not a change. The bigger thing is that the pension has been removed from the fire negotiation contracts. So it allows us to talk directly to the pension board, which has allowed for quicker movement. So it's been a positive. So I don't anticipate there be any pushback on anything that we proposed.
Questions?
Mr. Skelton,
Yes, ma'am.
do you consider what the actuary has suggested as modifications to be very minor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's from what I understand, it's how the money or when the money is injected into the fund, not the actual amount. The amount is the same.
Okay.
So, yes, ma'am.
A pretty minor change.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Other questions for Mr. Reed, Mr. Skelton? Sounds like great progress.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Reed, anything else?
No, sir, not unless you have any questions for me.
No, ma'am. Thank you very much. Mr. Skelton, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, board. I appreciate your time.
On to 5B, Mr. Burnham. Okay, I'd like to ask Mr. Burnham, who's wearing multiple hats today, to present items 5B and 5C. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, and good morning, members. So I am Brian Burnham, the PRB Staff Analytical Services Manager, and I will provide you with the report on reporting compliance. Next slide, please. So the information provided on this slide contains some information reported to us as of the end of June. For fiscal year 2024 reporting, the only remaining deadline is our December 31st fiscal year end systems. The reports will be due by the end of this month, and once they've all been reported, we'll have a complete data set for 2024. Next slide, please. For a quick reminder on the PRB noncompliance policy, we send email reminders to our systems notifying them of upcoming deadlines, and then 2 notices to the systems if they are past their deadline. After 60 days of noncompliance, the sponsoring entity of the system is notified, and the system is placed on our list of noncompliant systems on our website, and we discuss them at these board meetings. Next slide. So for that list, since the previous board meeting, Cleburne Fire, Dallas Police and Fire, San Angelo Fire, and University Park Fire have all become compliant with annual reporting requirements and were removed. Nacogdoches had submitted their 2023 reports and have come off the list for that reporting period, but they became over 60 days non-compliant with the 2024 fiscal year reporting back in April, since they are a June fiscal year end month and were due back in January. They have notified us that they expect their 2024 audited financial report to be presented to their board at a meeting later this month, and we should receive that report shortly thereafter, which would complete their annual reporting requirements for 2024. So they're very close to coming off this list. The other plan on this list, Floresville Electric Light and Power System, is non-compliant for 2023 due to their audited financial report not including the required investment expense disclosures. The 2024 report is due by the end of this month, and we expect that the 2024 audit should include the missing 2023 numbers in addition to their 2024 numbers that they will report. Next slide, please. So this is a brand new slide to the compliance report. It shows non-compliance with some of our non-annual reports. Specifically, we're focusing on the actuarial audits and actuarial experience studies. So both the actuarial audit and the experience study requirements are just requirements for systems with at least $100 million in total assets. The system sponsor is required to hire an independent actuary to perform the audit of the valuations, which is conducted by the systems actuary, that are conducted by the systems actuary every 5 years. And at least every 5 years, retirement systems are required to have their actuary perform experience studies. So just to word that in a different way, the actuarial audit is a requirement for the sponsor of the retirement systems. The experience study is a requirement for the actual systems themselves.
I have a question, please. Did you say that the plan's actuary is responsible for conducting the audit?
No. So what I meant to say in that statement was that the city or the sponsor will hire their own independent actuary to do an audit of the systems actuary's reports.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for that confusion. In addition to these reports, systems also must submit other reports such as minimum education training reports and actuarial evaluations, but this slide is just focusing on the actuarial audit and the experience study reports due to those reports either being part of other updates and different agenda items such as the actuarial evaluations and FSRPs that David discussed earlier, or because the reporting deadline is not a defined date. So an example for that could be something like an investment policy. Those are due to us whenever they update the policy. There's no set date of when they have to update those policies. So of the 4 systems on this list, Beaumont is the only one that has previously submitted an actuarial audit, and they did so in March 4th of 2019, which made their latest due date back in 2024. The Dallas County Hospital, Irving Fire, and Laredo Fire systems have all had assets above 100 million for over a decade now, but they've never submitted an actuarial audit to the Pension Review Board. And just as a reminder, those actuarial audits are responsibilities of the sponsor to hire out an actuary to get those performed.
So in our communication with them, do they know that this is a requirement? They've heard from us, acknowledged it?
Yeah. So there's been communication with every single one of these systems on this list. Letters have been sent. We've been back and forth, and yeah, they're all aware.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the communications, is it with both the systems and the sponsors, or just the systems?
I am not aware if David was heading up this effort, since these are typically actuarial reports. I know for a fact the systems were contacted. If he contacted the sponsors, I'm not advised.
David just nodded to me that yes, we
Yes.
did contact both the sponsors
Very
and
good.
the systems.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, just the last one I noticed is that all systems have received letters notifying them of the noncompliance with the requirement, and all of them have informed us that they are working with their governmental entities to become compliant. There's 3 additional systems, though, that I'd like to bring to your attention before we move on. At the time of putting this report together, Denton Fire had informed us that both their actuarial audit and experience study were completed, but they hadn't had meetings scheduled for their systems board to approve them and then send them to our office. We have received the actuarial audit at this time, but we're still waiting for their experience study. The Dallas Employees Retirement Fund has informed us that they are undergoing an experience study and they expect it to be completed later this summer. And the San Antonio Metropolitan Transit Retirement Plan has submitted draft copies of their actuarial audit, and a final copy is expected as soon as it can be presented to their board and sent to us. Next slide, please. This final slide just provides an overview on the reporting deadlines for the 2024 fiscal year reports. Our largest group of systems, which is 69 out of our 100 plans, has their due date upcoming on July 29th. We have already received reports from a number of these systems. We expect to receive the majority of them after we send out our final reminders to them on July 15th. After July, we will start receiving fiscal year 2025 reports, first from systems with a fiscal year end date of February 28th, which will have reports due in September of this year. So unless there are any more questions, that concludes my report on reporting and compliance.
Questions for Mr. Burnham on noncompliance and compliance? Thank you, Mr. Burnham. This concludes the actuarial committee items. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He's got one more.
Stay there, please, Brian. Sorry. Mr. Burnham's going to talk about the intensive study on Chapter 810 plans.
Thank you. So I will provide you with an update on our next intensive study. Next slide, please. So for some background, in lieu of an intensive review of a specific retirement system, staff has begun working on an intensive study of the systems that we classify as Chapter 810 plans, which are named after their government code statute that governs them. We felt this was an important group to study as we tend to focus more on the financial health of our statewide, municipal, and TELFRA systems. The Chapter 810 plans are primarily made up of supplemental or special district retirement plans, such as hospitals, water districts, transit authorities, and others. These systems typically utilize an actuarially determined contribution structure as opposed to having fixed rate contributions. They also usually have assumptions that would be considered more on the conservative end. Next slide, please. So the purpose or goals of this study are to highlight how these systems operate, and we plan to accomplish that by providing an overview of the governance structure and decision-making process associated with them. For example, many of these plans have a structure where their sponsor and pension decision makers are one and the same, or they might even rely on a smaller committee of their board to handle all their pension issues. We aim to take a closer look at and evaluate the actuarial conditions and assumptions that these systems use. We saw a glimpse of some of these assumptions when we studied what systems were using for their lump sum assumptions, and we passed guidance on that last year. So while reviewing that, we saw a number of systems using outdated interest rates and mortality assumptions to value their lump sum options. We also plan to take a close look at some of their revenue streams of these systems, which includes contribution structures, their asset allocations, and more, including potentially looking at how the Texas Hospital Association manages a number of these plans, as they kind of are a sponsor for a large grouping of many of the hospital plans that make up this chapter. Next slide, please. So one of the steps that we have already taken is we sent out a survey to all of our 34 systems back in May, which is actually 33 now, as one of these systems has just very recently, in the past couple of days, terminated their retirement system.
Which one is that?
The Arlington Deferred Income Plan for seasonal and part-time employees. It was a pretty small plan that was just very niche for some members of their city.
They just settled up and...
Yeah, we've been working with them. We've been expecting it for a while and been in contact with them. And just a few days ago, they sent an email stating that they've paid out their members but are still waiting on a zero balance sheet to give us the final documents that we can have to verify everything.
Interesting. Thank you.
So all surveys included questions on their governance and decision-making structures, including topics like the makeup of their board, whether they have a retirement committee, or if any non-board members are key decision makers with fiduciary responsibilities, for example, like a CEO or a chief financial officer. We also asked about how often the board discusses their pension topics, since the pension would not be the main duty of these boards, and how often they communicate with their members about the retirement plan. The systems that were contacted last year about their lump sum provisions were also sent additional questions asking if they had discussed the guidance that we published and whether they made any changes to their provisions. Altogether, we received responses from 18 of these plans. Next slide. And so for a timeline, so we began our initial planning and research back during session in March, and then we sent the surveys out at the beginning of May. We're currently in the beginning stages of analyzing the data that we've received, and we're drafting the report, in which we hope to finalize and present to the board in the fall. And if there are no questions, that will conclude my report.
So members, these 810 plans and their plan sponsors are a bit of a horse of a different color. They're sort of quasi-public entities, as Mr. Burnham indicated. They're not your typical governmental entities. And as you may have noted in the statistics that Mr. Fee was presenting earlier, they also are a bit distinctive with regard to the their actuarial condition, their return assumptions, and other issues. And I think the results of this study will be very, very interesting. Comments or questions for Mr. Burnham on this?
I do have a question.
Ms. Dush.
I don't know if it's too late to incorporate another item to be reviewed as part of the study, but in the appendix to Mr. Fee's materials, there's some discussion of employer normal cost, and there is a specific page for 810 systems. And on that page, it notes that for the 810 plans where the employees are covered with Social Security, the average employer normal cost for those employees is around 8%. But for those organizations that fund a plan where the employees are not covered by Social Security, the average employer normal cost is only 4%. It's confusing because it should be the opposite, I would think. If you don't have Social Security, shouldn't you be getting a bigger pension? And so perhaps as part of the governance or some part of the review, it would be interesting to just get some more information on why those funds where employees are not covered by Social Security are getting such a small employer normal cost.
Yeah, that's an astute observation.
You know, it's just confusing to me.
Yeah, it seems backward. Other comments or questions for Mr. Burnham? And before I hand it back, I just want to bring the members' attention to the latter half of Section 5A that is included in your packet. We did not talk about it in any detail today, but there's a treasure trove of information in there about the actuarial condition, contribution experience of these 100 or so plans that we're responsible for reviewing. And I would encourage members to spend some time looking at all that information. With that, Madam Chair, I'll hand it back to you. That concludes the report of the Actuarial Committee.
Thank you. And at this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Zook to walk us through the Investment Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will ask Robert Munter to present item 6A.
All right, good morning, members. My name is Robert Munter. I'm the investment analyst here at the Texas Pension Review Board, and I will be covering item 6A today. So for the report, what we're going to be covering today in the presentation is mainly focused on two things. So the first one being, we are bringing back our investment data report, and this is something that the board, you may remember, this is something that we created a bit over a year ago. This is a report that's going to be similar to the AV report, which is going to be, though, more focused on the investment returns, the investment expenses, as well as other things that are impacting systems related to their investments. So we will just be providing a little bit of an update as to that investment data report. And then additionally, we will be talking a little bit, as David and Annika mentioned earlier, about some of those systems with investment and return assumptions that are at the 7.75% or higher, as well as what we're seeing nationally from other public retirement systems based off of the 2025 NCPERS survey. The next slide. So first, just a little bit of an update here. As Brian's mentioned, we've received 31 reports from systems for 2024. We will be receiving the bulk of 60, 70 more systems in the coming weeks here for 2024 information. So the investment data report right now just has a little bit of an update there with those 31 systems. But what we are seeing from them, from the report so far, is that 2024 was a good year for systems. And so a lot of them are seeing a good increase and are either starting to exceed their investment return assumptions or are starting to get closer to that level, which is what we want to see instead of what we have been seeing, which is where a lot of systems are a little bit below or considerably below the return assumptions. Additionally, as mentioned in the AV report, systems have been lowering their return assumptions, which makes it a lot easier for them to be hitting those return assumptions with their investments. The next slide. Just a little bit update too, as well as for the investment expenses, what we are seeing. So again, the investment expenses are a very important part because this is one of the main things that systems can control. And when we start comparing this to the 2025 NCPER survey, so the more of a national level of how systems are performing for pensions, we do see that 68% of Texas systems are either at or lower than the average, which is a good thing. So a lot of systems are, keeping a fairly low expense ratio, which is very important. And just to sort of clarify here that the investment expenses, when we mention them as a percent, it is a percent of assets. So when we say 2%, it would essentially be paying 2% of their assets out in that given year for their investments. Now, additionally, and this is something that we brought up in some of the previous meetings, luckily the systems that have predominantly been paying those higher investment expenses are the ones that are seeing very good performances. So, example that we've brought up before is Houston Municipal. They've been doing very well, and a lot of that reason for their higher investment expenses is because of their profit shared carried interest, so performance fees for their alternative type investments. So it's good that we're seeing, just overall right now that those higher numbers though are coming down, but as well, the majority of systems are, at or around that national average level. So there's not too many that are sitting above it.
Mr. Zook, may I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Munter, I'm sorry. Can you clarify this line here. Is the 71 basis points, is that the NCPERS number or is that the Texas number?
That's the NCPERS number. So for Texas, the average for Texas that we have based off of the investment expense information that's been reported is, excuse me, it's 0.65.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zook.
Absolutely. Continue, Mr. Munter.
All right. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So essentially now we'll just be focusing on the investment return assumptions. And so what we see from the NCPER survey as well is some interesting information that one of the questions that they asked a number of the pensions, and that was reported back to them, they were asking, what are the type of things that they're considering doing, making adjustments to their assumptions or other things that they're considering. And one of the top ones that the majority of pensions are looking to do around this time within the past year or so has been looking to lower their actuarial assumed rate of return. And so that's some of them, looking within the past year as well as a little bit longer, but also currently. And so this is something that we want to, bring up because as, the board may remember, it was only just a couple of years ago where we were getting some of those systems off of the 8% investment return assumptions. And so now that they've been lowering, this is something to where the final systems that were brought up in the AV report, may want to start considering lowering those investment return assumptions, as this is one of the top things that, nationally systems are looking at. And if we go to the next slide, these are the final systems. And as David and Annika mentioned, El Paso, they are on this list right now, but they do have an asterisk there because they have noted that they are lowering and voted to lower to that 7.5%. But we just have this here because this is based off of the last change reported. So once we do get the report that shows that they've been updated, they won't be on this. But additionally, it's good to point out here that they've been performing fairly well. And then additionally, that 6.8% number that's on here for their 10-year net return, that's based off of their 2023 information. So when they report to us in a year, if they've also been experiencing the same good year as everyone else, they'll probably be either at or maybe even above their investment return assumption of 7.5. For the remaining systems, that'll just leave with 4 systems right now. Additionally, if we're looking at when was the last time that these changes were made, we're getting close to a decade for some of them. So it's definitely a good time to start considering, are these assumptions still reasonable? And to stay vigilant as to whether or not lowering them may be beneficial for the system to do and what's reasonable. Additionally, when we start looking at the nationally, what are public retirement systems assuming for their rate of return, we're seeing that the median is 7% right now, with actually the average being 6.67% for our investment rate of return assumption. Now, we have reached out to these systems regarding their assumptions, and a number of them have provided us information as well as talked with us about it. As an example, Harlingen, we had a conversation yesterday, and they are here today to, I believe, just answer any questions that the board may have. But, we've talked to them, and Harlingen's very close to their return assumption right now, so, another good year, they're right at it. But for some of these systems, it's definitely something to where they really should be reconsidering as to, where they've been and how they've been able to perform, and whether or not they really do need to be considering lowering these return assumptions again. Just as an example, Orange Fire sitting, a decade since the last time that they've changed it, and they are a little bit below, or quite a bit below, where that investment return assumption is.
Mr. Munter,
Mr. Zook,
go ahead, Mr.
Zook.
Gonzalez.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Munter.
Yes.
Regarding these return assumptions, do the plans have a requirement to have a policy in place that dictates annually, every 3 years, periodically reviewing the return assumptions through an independent party?
I'm not sure about the independent party. I'm not aware of that. We can definitely look into that. So, obviously, they're all required to have investment policy statements as to how they're structuring these. A lot of them do have good investment consultants. I do know that San Angelo has informed us that they did recently change investment consultants, and they are working on that. and it is a part of their process to review it. I do know that they do. I believe Harlingen also, through our conversations, they are actively reviewing constantly that and monitoring the investment return assumption. I haven't spoken to Big String or Orange particularly about that policy, so I wouldn't be able to speak to that, but I do know that I believe Orange Fire uses the same consultant as Harlingen, so they probably do as well, constantly review that. So that's at least with the information that I have right now.
And one follow-up, if you, regarding more generally, the rest of the plans outside of this list, are you aware of any of the, let's say, some of the larger plans like teachers or otherwise similar, have policies in place that dictate when and how they should review the return assumptions?
Yes, the larger systems do have a lot more policies and procedures that they clearly identify as to when they should be starting to review those the investment return assumptions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Munter, a couple of comments, if I may. The comment was stated earlier, peculiar. This is peculiar. We're going to have more data to be able to show a little bit more what we consider to be on the investment committee a pretty lopsided reality between expectations and what has actually been the experience of these plans. You know, last 10 years have been one of the best market environments that we have seen. It's obviously been a volatile period, but at the same time, you know, again, depending on it's a 23 report or a 24 report, you're talking about 11% plus, you know, for the S&P 500. And so for any plan to say, I haven't done it for the last decade, but the next decade's going to be different. You know, there's something I say very regularly, hope is not a good investment strategy. So my message to all of the consultants for each of these plans is that A, we don't want to change them every year like a yo-yo, but we also need to be realistic about, you know, what has been the actual experience of a plan, what is a realistic expectation for the next decade, and should we be changing the assumptions? Obviously, the vast majority of plans are lowering their investment assumptions simply because of the experience of the last really 20 to 30 years. And when a system has, you know, 70 basis points above the median and over 100 basis points above the national average, they have to have a really, really good reason to do that. And as, you know, was stated earlier by Mr. Brainerd, you know, these numbers hide the reality of the health of a system. And the only way that we can protect the people going forward, the future employees, the retirees, et cetera, is to have a really accurate picture of what the system's health is. And we'd rather be more conservative with that when we're taking care of people's livelihood than be aggressive of, oh, we're going to be great and we're going to be able to hit those assumptions. So I will say the investment committee's focus on this is extremely high. And for all of these plans, we would strongly encourage you to go reassess, evaluate at the board level, evaluate with your consultants, and be prepared to answer questions to either our committee or to this big board of why you're different and that much an outlier compared to everybody else. And if you have a good reason, that's great. But we're gonna need to hear that. And so we're gonna be very, very focused on this over the next 2 years. So please be prepared. And our strong recommendation is be conservative. You can always, you know, I've said it all the time on this setting. What's the worst case scenario? If you can live with that, the upside will take care of itself. But if we design these plans around something that we know with confidence that we can hit, or we feel very strongly we can hit, we're going to be able to let the upside take care of itself. So, Mr. Hunter, back to you.
Yeah, I believe Marcia.
All right. As an actuary, I have a little different perspective on all of this, which is the information provided on page 6 is interesting, and it tells me whether or not prior assumptions were set appropriately. But again, remember, when you're doing an actuarial valuation, you're looking forward. So prior returns, like I said, are interesting, are a data point, but I'm really more interested in what the capital market assumptions together with your asset allocation is going to do, taking into account your liquidity needs. What strikes me here is that we have a group of TELFRA plans who, by my experience, are quite mature. Generally, I would think that most of them have negative non-investment cash flows. And so they depend on investment earnings to help pay benefits out. And that should be taken into account when setting a forward-looking real rate of return. So, again, I find, comparing the investment return assumptions to prior, to the returns a little backwards, because quite honestly, what I think an investment committee or the members of the board who are responsible for selecting and monitoring investments should be doing is talking about how much risk they're willing to take. What are the measures of risk that the fund should take with respect to investments? Then they should, be optimizing their asset allocation based on that level of risk that they're willing to take. And out of that, the actuary together with the investment consultant can say, here with this asset allocation, today's capital market assumptions, you have a 50% chance of hitting this return over the next extended forecast, which for an actuary is generally, 15, 30 plus years. And so, again, what bothers me is that we're not discussing the amount of risk that is embedded in these asset allocations that are driving an expectation of getting 7.75% real rate of return over a long-term long-term horizon, considering today's capital market assumptions. So that's where I'm at. And the question that I would have based on the group of plans, and Mr. Munter, you're not David Fee, the actuary, the staff actuary here, but I would say, is the actuary for these funds commenting on the fund's choice of these investment real rates of return, looking to the future, considering the liquidity situations? There should be a risk assessment in each of the valuations associated with the selection of assumptions. And so, again, while you are speaking to the fund and to the investment consultants, I'm speaking to these plans actuaries about whether or not you're properly disclosing the amount of risk that you see associated with setting an assumption or counseling the fund to set an assumption at these levels.
Thank you. Very good comments. Anybody else before we move
Yes,
on?
Mr. Zook, I have a comment, please. A couple of comments. Ms. Dush, as an actuary, I know that one of the factors that the actuary should consider when recommending an investment return assumption is past performance. And clearly that does not seem to be the case here. And I think you raise a very good question. Who is actually the decider with regard, or the strong recommender with regard to these investment return assumptions? Is it the investment consultant or is it the actuary? And certainly the actuary ought to be involved. I've got an issue about all of this with regard to governance, though. Honestly, a public pension plan should want to have a lower investment return assumption. It makes it generates a higher required contribution, it's safer, and it's a lower bogey. It's a lower hurdle over which the plan has to get with regard to their investment performance. And so I scratched my head for some time. Why is it that all of these TELFRA plans have the highest return assumptions of the plans in the state? And the answer occurred to me, and that is that we have boards that have not complete but large authority over their benefit levels. TELFRA boards have the authority to set benefits as long as the actuary signs off on it. And that's a very unusual arrangement. If you look at public pension plans across the country, very, very few have the authority over their benefit levels that the TELFRA plans do. And so basically these TELFRA boards are conflicted when it comes to setting the return assumption, because what is required to trigger a benefit enhancement among these health plans? And that is you have to have the actuary sign off on it, that it meets certain standards. And so the return assumption is a vital factor in allowing the actuary to sign off on the condition of the plan. And if these plans were to reduce their return assumption, it would make it much more difficult for the boards to be able to justify benefit enhancements. To me, that's the heart of the problem. It's a governance issue, and it's an issue that I had hoped the legislature would take up last session. They did not. Hope springs eternal. Perhaps someday we can get a board that is responsible only for administering the plan and leave the policymaking to the policymaking body, namely the plan sponsor, the city council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we've said it before, and I'll say it again for anybody who hasn't heard it. Where there is good alignment, there's usually good decisions. When there's bad alignment, there's frequently not good decisions. And that lack of alignment in Telfer plans is a glaring issue that I do hope that the legislature will address. In the meantime, we need to have all of those folks look at that, say, there's nothing wrong with being conflicted, but let's make sure that we don't make bad decisions because we're conflicted, and let's get the return assumptions where they really should be based on, as was very well articulated, the capital market assumptions looking forward and what obviously is important for that particular plan's cash flows and their overall health of that plan. So thank you all very, very much for that.
Mr.
Munter?
We have an opportunity with the representatives from Harlingen Fire here. Could we ask perhaps that they talk to us a little bit about how they have gone about setting their assumption and what their actuary has counseled them on?
That'd be totally fine. If they're there and willing to do so, we'd love to hear from them.
Would it be okay if Robert finished his presentation, or did you want to do that right now?
Let's go ahead and finish the presentation. I think that's a
Okay.
great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And really, this is just, the next couple of slides here are just a little bit of conversation about ultimately what are some of the considerations that go into setting these investment return assumptions, as well as the creating that asset allocation, which is so important to the plan, and how it's ultimately going to return and what type of risk that they're taking. So a couple of these things are, fairly obvious, being the time horizon, the maturity of the plan, the liquidity needs, and we've been talking about it, as well as those capital market expectations. All this really fuels into the risk tolerance of what you can actually do. And the funded status does also play a big role in this, because, what you might decide to do asset allocation wise will depend quite heavily on, if you're very well funded versus if you're poorly funded, it puts strains on other aspects, which impacts the asset allocation. So one of the first things that I do just want to bring up, and this is something that we've brought up a number of times in some of our past intensive reviews, which is that a very important factor to consider is that active to retired ratio. So this is a way of sort of determining, how mature is a plan. And the reason this is so important, and it goes on to the next slide as well, but is that with that active retired ratio is that as you get more and more retirees, you have more and more distributions that need to be coming out of that plan. So more distributions means that you need to have either some form of more fixed assets or more liquidity available, and that starts to lessen what you can do with the asset allocation. Because if you need more liquidity or more fixed assets, it means that you can't be going into some of those illiquid investments that can actually generate you more returns, usually. And so that's a very important thing. But as well, it's a big factor when you're looking at the maturity of a plan or its funded status, because if a plan is not well funded and has a large amount of retirees, and this is something that David has mentioned a lot, is if you don't have a fully funded position for your active or for your actual retirees, and essentially you're at that point to where you don't have enough assets there for it, if you have to try to push the risk in order to hit these higher return assumptions, is it really conservative for a plan to be investing that way when 50, 60% or more of your members are retired, right? Do you want to be a retired member knowing that you have a very large equity position for this, right? And this is people's, ultimately, their retirement accounts, and you need that more conservative nature because, they are retirees. And this is something that they're going to depend on. And they don't necessarily have, the ability to take and absorb one bad market. One bad market can put a funded that's already underfunded, in a worse position to a point to where it becomes very challenging to actually get out of that hole.
Mr. Munter, another comment here. When you have a small active group compared to your retiree group, if you are taking losses in your actuarial valuation and you're hiking up your unfunded liability due to losses, you've set a 7 3/4 assumption and you're hitting 6 3/4. There's a small group. If you're a fixed rate contribution plan, you have a very small group to generate contributions to make up for that loss. So the ratio of active to retirees also tells you about how much volatility is inherent in your valuation results.
Yeah. And then also one thing I just want to note specifically for some of these plans that are, maybe only have 100 or so members, when we're looking at these ratios, there is some volatility in here. But these are, just snapshots, right? You may have one year where all of a sudden 5 or 10 people retire, and then all of a sudden that swings it very quickly to where you have a much larger ratio than you did previously. So that's just something that you have to keep in mind, that there can be some big changes there that happen very quickly that, you might not have expected coming. But then that also continues with the next slide, which is the impact of non-investment cash flow. And so when we're talking about non-investment cash flow, this is primarily just looking at, what are the amounts that are coming in from contributions versus the amount that are going out to distributions to pay those benefits. And when we're looking at these as a percentage, it's as a percentage of the total assets. So normally as a plan matures, they will eventually get to a point that normally they'll have some form of negative non-investment cash flow. And that's a normal thing to experience. But it's important to keep in mind because that is showing you how much is having to be made up by the investments, right? So the investments have to be able to take care of that, but also for your active members, have that growth to be able to basically meet the needs for them when they get to the retired age. And it's a very big thing to pay attention to because additionally, when you're looking at your funded ratios, if we bring up a system, say that's fully funded and is matured, a negative 2 or 3% non-investment cash flow is not a big deal. But if they have bad years or if they're underfunded, that same system, if they all of a sudden went to, say, 50%, well, now that, because this is as a percentage of assets, that non-investment cash flow goes from that negative 2 or 3 to negative 4 or 6. And if we're talking about systems that are realistically hitting 7% or so in returns, your returns are completely going out the door. You don't have anything else really to help generate that growth that you need for the active members, which then puts you into a very difficult situation to try to actually fix the hole that you're in. And so that's why it's very important to still keep these things in mind when you're setting these investment return assumptions as to what's realistic, what's reasonable, and what's something that we can hit to make sure that we aren't potentially aiming too high and then having those losses incur over time. But ultimately, that ends my presentation unless there's any other questions that I can answer.
Any other questions for Mr. Munter? All right, we can proceed to have a conversation with Harlan, the folks from Harlingen.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Mario Alvarado, Harlingen Firemen's Relief and Retirement Fund. To my right, Vice Chairman Joey Albritton. Actually, his name is Samuel, but I think he prefers Joey. Thank you for having us.
We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you for the dialogue. I can certainly appreciate all the passion. Mr. Zook, great comments, great points. Mr. Gonzalez, great questions, board. We're here pretty much to answer any questions and provide a little clarity on the skepticism of our numbers. One of the things that's extremely important to us is we don't want the board to assume that Harlingen takes the selection of these assumptions lightly in any way. We don't sit around the table and just roll the dice and say, what are we feeling today? It is a calculated process. To some of your comments, Mr. Zook, we we are very passionate about the well-being of our members and being active firefighters and on the board. We definitely want it to be successful. We're not at retirement yet, but we need that money to be there at the time that we get ready to do so. So we obviously have a vested interest in the success, in the accuracy of the numbers. We're neither in favor or against of lowering that assumption. We've done it before. The last time we did it was in 2017. We were at 8%, and the fund, was struggling. We've made quite a few moves since then. We lowered it to 7 3/4, but we knew that wasn't, the end of the road for us. We knew there was a lot more work ahead of us. Another point that you mentioned, Ms. Dush, was resources. You mentioned the word peculiar. I've heard that a little bit. It is peculiar how some of these funds can come up with these assumptions. Fortunately for us, Harlingen is blessed to have some of those resources available to us. Our consultant, who works very, very closely with our actuary every quarter, sometimes every 6 months, definitely every 2 years when we have our reports generated. It's not a walk in the park. They actually go head to head and prove to each other that these numbers are legitimate numbers. When the study is due, our actuary will come to us, make his recommendation. The board discusses it. We talk to our consultant. Consultant gives us an outline or a plan as to whether or not our assumption is achievable, and board discusses it, and we all regroup to make an informed, calculated decision. That's essentially the process in Harlingen. Our consultant has done, I think, a very, very good job of diversifying our portfolio. They've literally created an allocation study for a 1 year for us with alternatives on a reallocation to make sure that we hit those target numbers. I guess essentially what I'd like to set the board's mind at ease is that Harlingen doesn't walk into this assumption selection blindly. We do our due diligence. We do not have a policy to review the assumption, but I think it's part of the norm. It's just something that we do on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis. Once our, we've got monthly reports from our consultant and some of our other managers. When he comes down to visit every quarter, comes down to visit biannually. It's a common discussion. So as we don't have a policy in place, but it's not something that's left to rear its ugly head whenever things go wrong. We're definitely on it. So it's a little bit about how we do business, but I'd like to offer an opportunity to the board to answer any questions regarding other processes that you feel may hinder that assumption.
That's very helpful, and obviously we're grateful for your openness and willing to share about what your process is. Just kind of for the knowledge, since 2017, when you last changed the assumption by a quarter point, have you changed consultants or actuaries since that time, or is it the same people that you were working with before?
No, we have not changed a consultant. As a matter of fact, we acquired the consultant shortly, I think I would say about 2 months after we voted to lower that assumption. So we pulled the trigger on lowering that assumption rate, and collectively decided that we're going to need some help moving forward. We've changed managers. The consultant has assisted us with reallocating that portfolio. We're more diligent with the review of IPS, so that he's been very instrumental in doing that. We've renewed the agreement every year. It isn't something that we just place on cruise control. We actually go back as a board every year and make sure that we're happy with the work that they're doing. We're collectively agree to, bring them, to renew that agreement and make sure that we're within guidelines of the law and we're within guidelines of the statute, to make the plan successful. That's so.
Thank you for
the short. I guess the long answer is no. We haven't changed consultants. Our actuary as well. We've been utilizing the same staff for quite some time now, but unofficially, the board has decided that we will be going out for RFP since it's been a while, just to do our due diligence and make sure that we're being accurate with our numbers. Nothing against the actuary we're using now. We love them to death, trust them wholeheartedly, but it is what it is, right? Business is business and personal is personal. So that's for that reason, we need to make sure that we do our due diligence.
It's very wise to do that on a refresh basis, just so that way, A, you can show good governance, and B, that you can make sure you know what the market looks like, et cetera. So members, what questions would you have for them?
I do have a question. So, and again, I want to compliment you on the process that you're going through, which I think is I wish you could kind of sell that process to, the other folks who are not using such a process. But yeah, I think you've got a good process there. So my question is then, in working with your investment consultant, have you essentially developed an asset allocation that is expected to return 7 3/4 over a extended period of time? Is that the best estimate for the expected return?
Yes, ma'am, we have. There was actually a study that was just recently created for this meeting. I emailed it to David Fee, so he does have that available. There are 2 pages of reference on that, page 10 and page 12. I'm sure he'll be able to get that to you at a later date. I printed out a hard copy, put it in the visor of the vehicle we had, and I forgot it. But yes, we do have an allocation study in place that shows the fund's capability of achieving.
And is that like at the 50th percentile?
So what that study shows, it shows 2 benchmarks. It has the 50th percentile, and it also shows the 95th. Our estimation is that we're going to be somewhere in between. The 50th percentile shows, I believe, 7.1% earnings. We're fairly confident we won't be there, and we can't exactly guarantee we're going to be in the 95th, but between the 95th is showing, darn it, you're going to have to read that. I can't see.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah.
I've got the 95th percentile showing 29.59 and the 50th percentile 6.87.
All right, so the way I would understand it is you've got a 5% chance of hitting 20% returns.
Right.
And you've got a 50% chance of hitting 7.1. So to hit 7.75, maybe it's a 40% chance, something like that.
Right.
So I guess my question is the fact that you have less than a 50% chance of hitting the 775, the fund is essentially taking extra risk associated with a real rate of return assumption of 7 3/4. And so you could be expecting losses in the future. Oh, not any one particular year, but
Right.
over the period.
Right.
And so that's a risk to the unfunded, and the contribution rates in the future.
Absolutely, I can definitely agree with that. I think what we're confident in, of the fact that our earning history has shown that we've been well above 7.75. We've been above 8%. That projection is based on one mix, the mix that our allocations are set at right now. He has developed 3 other mixes that would get our portfolio to a higher assumed rate. That would require a board level reallocation and a revamp of our IPS. So on the current mix that we've just explained to you, there is that extra level of risk. But he has presented 3 other options for that reallocation to be able to avoid that risk a little more.
But again, if you change your allocation to be expected to earn 7.75, there is risk associated with that too.
Absolutely.
You're obviously choosing some, more equity, more alternatives or whatever to get to that.
Absolutely.
So the question is, where do you want to place your risk? And again, if your current allocation is, at a risk level that you're comfortable with respect to the assets, and that is expected to return 7.1, then, I have to question whether or not you should be still at 7.75. But again, I like the fact that you're working closely with your consultant and your actuary. I presume your actuary is at least putting something in their actuarial report.
Yes, he is.
To essentially, kind of note the level of risk that you seem to be taking here.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that is part of our actuarial standards of practice.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't want to come down too hard here because I think you're doing the right things, but I do have to question the 7.75.
We are definitely having that conversation with them, and we don't take it lightly.
Thank you.
It is not something that, there's too much at stake to take it lightly.
Love the fact that you realize that and appreciate that. Members, any other questions?
Mr. Zook, I have a couple questions, please.
Please.
Thank you all for coming up.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you being here. And thank you, sir, for your service as a firefighter.
Thank you, sir.
Do you happen to know if there has been any 10-year period in your fund's history that you have reached an average return on a net basis of 7.75%?
Actually, we have that, we were looking at that number just now.
So is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please share that with the PRB staff when you get a chance, when you get
Absolutely.
one?
Absolutely.
When you last discussed your investment return assumption with your investment consultant and your actuary, what did your actuary recommend?
Actuary recommended at least a reduction of 25 basis points to our assumption. So he said that 7.5 was a little more realistic. He was concerned that our fund would not be able to meet those earnings. The board discussed it. We talked to our consultant, and as a group, all 3 entities, the board, our consultant, and the actuary, we drew up a plan, had discussions. Our consultant was able to, defend his case or defend the assumption rate at that time.
Your consultant was recommending 7.75. Or was he recommending something higher?
The board was recommending we stay at 7.75, if possible. We went to our consultant and asked him if that number was still realistic and feasible. He generated the asset allocation study at that time. We presented it to the actuary, and he was comfortable with it. Here we are today. We are due for another actuary study this fiscal, which we will most likely be having this conversation with our actuary again. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And maybe just one other question. Y'all, over the last 10 years, have received 86% of the required actuarially determined contributions for your plan, which means that the contributions that are in place are not sufficient per the actuarial calculations. Were your investment return assumption below 7 3/4, that figure would be higher. You'd be receiving less because the cost would be going even higher. Why don't you want to have an actuarial return assumption that is lower, that would generate contributions that would tell the employer that you need higher contributions in order to fund your plan? Because right now, you're not even getting the full required contribution at 7 3/4. I would think that you would want to have an arrangement in which the employer is incentivized to pay their full contributions.
Well, I don't believe that the board does not want to lower the that assumed rate of return. As I mentioned, we're neither for nor against it. I think back to what I mentioned, is we're happy to do it, but we're trying to calculate the timing for that move. I think that I feel we have a great relationship with our city. Those officials actually sit on our board. The city manager, the gentleman who writes the checks for the cities, who can fund us as much as he can afford, sits on our board. He's a finance guy. I'm not a finance guy. So he's well aware of where the fund is at. He's well aware of the shortfall in contributions. He's well aware of our shortfalls in every area. Constantly in communication with him. Sits on his board. He sits on our board, changes hats, gets off of the board. I can call him anytime with any issues that we have. I certainly see your point and lowering that assumption to generate that involvement of the city to contribute more. But I'd like to see us do it for the right reasons. I guess, for lack of a better phrase, I don't want to generate a false negative just to have the city fund us. I don't want to generate a false positive either. So for that, our process has remained to collectively review, that assumed rate of return. Now, some of these negative shortfalls may come due to payroll growth, which is something that's in place to be rectified this year. That's being helped through our CVA agreement, where the fund has seen very, very, very little payroll growth. We are, I think, at year 1 or 1.5.
It's going to be 21% over 3 years.
It'll be 21% in the next couple of years, which we have not seen in a significant time. Another thing that probably doesn't look well on our financial reports is the funding. The shortfall exists because the city front loads their annual contributions on fiscal. So that's something that, although the funding doesn't appear to be there, it is there because it's front loaded at the beginning of the year. Again, I know we revert back to the assumption rate of return. I can't say that the board does not want to do it. I think we're measuring the time to calculate it properly.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Zook?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, Harlingen is at risk for being required to develop an FSRP. And I would just really encourage you that if you either start that process or you become required to develop an FSRP, that really as a part of that, you really take a hard look at all of your assumptions and build your FSRP response based on realistic assumptions, because you don't want to have to keep coming back.
Right.
to this. And again, I think to Mr. Brainerd's point, which is, if as part of the FSRP you can get to a actuarially determined contribution structure rather than, I assume you're on a fixed rate structure right now. If you can get to that, then you can manage the gains and losses in a much easier manner as they roll through the valuations. So again, I think you're heading for an FSRP, and so I think this is something you really should put some time and effort, as you said you are, with the next valuation into looking at the assumptions and do the plan based on good assumptions.
And just to give the board a little more peace of mind, our last valuation happened right smack in the middle of all the COVID situation, right? So everybody took a hit, took some losses, and that valuation was done at 36,900,000. The fund now is on the heels of 45 million. So we've made significant gains. It's going to be a much better valuation. Harlingen is doing great things to try and fund fund the plan. So we're very optimistic. I think the next time we visit, it may be for coffee and Danishes. So.
Thank you.
That's very
Mr.
good.
Zucker?
Yes, Mr. Gonzalez.
One comment. The rest of the other board members, I appreciate your questions and comments. I think I would have said like or similar and asked the same. So I just want to make one comment that's come to mind. So I think, one mindset that the board should consider taking is that cash from contributions is always optimal from an investor's perspective over putting assets at risk and subjecting them to market forces. So if you can, to Mr. Brainerd's point, if you can negotiate a way to get higher cash contributions, that's the optimal route to go. It's money in the bank versus taking risk.
Very good.
Duly noted. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Any other questions? Thank you, members. The last comment that I would make is the wonderful adage of what can go up can go down. And so there was a very strong year last year, and particularly in your report, what can go up 21.79% in a year can also go down a lot too.
Absolutely.
And, Einstein is, I think, famous from quoting, the wonderful thing about compounding, it's truly a miracle as long as you don't interrupt it. I mean, Mr. Buffett or Mr. Munger. But point being is that, the big time gains can also be offset by the big time losses when markets get unfriendly. So I would just really encourage you to have a conversation with a consultant to talk about what's the worst case scenario, what's the downside. I shudder to think about what that study you were referring to, if 95 percentile performance would get you to up 29. I shudder to think about what a 5% performance would do, and nobody expects that until it happens. So 50-50 is not good, but it's certainly, if you're not going to hit it at 50-50, to everybody's points, I would get the contributions higher. That's a sure thing. And then taking a lower conservative assumption as a firefighter and a future retiree, that is what's going to be in your personal best interest and the other firefighters that obviously you represent is the conservative path forward. We really appreciate you both being here in Austin and look forward to getting updates from you over time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
While we transition, are there any other questions for Mr. Munter or for the investment committee? If not, this concludes the investment committee items, and I will pass the baton back to the chair.
Thank you. I think at this time we're going to take a short 10-minute break, and then we will pick back up with agenda item number 7. Time's now 12:06, and the board will reconvene the meeting. Okay, at this time, the board has reconvened. We do have board members Harper and Gonzalez remotely. I'll acknowledge the record when board member Zook is able to join us as well. Moving on to agenda item number 7, which is an update regarding the 88th regular legislative session. I call on Mariah Miller and Ashley Rondon to provide us with information on agenda items 7A, B, and C.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariah Miller, and I am the Policy and Communications Manager for the PRB. During the legislative session, the agency is tasked with providing actuarial impact statements to the legislature on bills affecting the funding of public retirement systems, as well as providing fiscal notes for any bills that may carry a cost to our agency directly. Additionally, the agency tracks and summarizes all of the pension bills. In this presentation, I will review some of the major pension bills that passed. Overall, our agency tracked 118 pension bills and published a tracking report multiple times a week, including one final overall report at the end of session. This report is located on the legislative page of our website. Of those 118 bills, only 17 bills passed this session, and our agency completed a total number of 55 actuarial impact statements. In your board packets, we provided summaries of the past pension bills, and there were a few that we wanted to note during this presentation as well. Next slide.
Just real quick, I just want the record to reflect that board member Zook has rejoined the meeting.
So first we have the Law Enforcement and Custodial Officer Supplemental Retirement Fund, or LECOS. This is a fund that's within the Texas Employees Retirement System. SB 1737 by Senators Huffman and Flores would expand LECOS eligibility to include certain employees of the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, the Comptroller of Public Accounts, and the Office of the Attorney General. Next slide. Overall, there were a few Judicial Retirement Plan 2 bills that increased judge salaries and changes certain requirements for members. On screen, 2 of the bills are highlighted. Both are aimed at increasing judicial salaries, and one of them, SB 293, also uncouples the elected class annuity. Slide. Moving to TRS, House Bill 2 by Representative Buckley is this session's school funding bill. It is not traditionally a pension bill, but it does affect teacher salaries, so the PRB completed impact statements for this bill. House Bill 4945 by Representative Ashby directs TRS to conduct a study on offering Texas A&M Forest Service wildland firefighters or other certain related positions alternative service benefits. This bill also specifies that the PRB is to assist with the study if necessary. The Texas Emergency Services Retirement System, which serves volunteer firefighters, had a bill, SB 2065, that updated the funding structure of TESRs. With this bill, all statewide systems are now considered actuarially sound. Key features of SB 2065 includes the removal of the statutory limit of state contributions, which was previously set at 1/3 of all contributions by TSRS entities, or TESRs, sorry, TESRs entities. The creation of an ADC, and specifies that contributions may not be used to fund benefit increases. Specifies that state contributions may not be used to fund benefit increases. Next slide. There are a few bills that would affect statewide systems investments. One of them, HB 34, prohibits state funds from being invested in China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. SB 667 by Senator Hughes prohibits statewide systems and the permanent school fund from investing in Chinese affiliated entities and requires systems to divest if they are currently invested in those entities. The bill requires systems to submit an annual report identifying all securities divested, sold, as well as what's currently invested or any changes that result from this new requirement. This bill does not add any new requirements to the PRB directly. The Comptroller's Office is the agency that will be handling these reports. Next slide. HB 3474 by Representative Lambert is the Investment Practices and Performance Evaluation Bill, which was based on PRB recommendations that we submitted in our past biennial report. The PRB will have to adopt a reporting schedule for IPPEs consistent with the current statutory requirements. Systems are still required to complete a report every 3 or 6 years, depending on their assets. The bill adds language to clarify the reporting due dates, specifying when a retirement system's assets first increase above either the 30 or 100 million threshold. The IPPEs would be due at the next scheduled reporting period published by the PRB. The bill also modifies the applicability of the IPPE reporting thresholds for subsequent reports to provide enhanced consistency and predictability. After a system initially triggers the IPPE requirement, subsequent reporting would be based on total pension liability rather than assets. The PRB will be updating the IPPE guidance by early 2026, and we will create and post the required IPPE schedule with the guidance. The proposed revised guidance will be presented and discussed this fall and adopted by January 2026. The agency is also considering the possibility of rulemaking during the 2026 review and will be communicating with systems to educate them on the updates. Next slide. The Austin Firefighters Retirement Fund had a funding reform bill passed this session, which is HPB 2802. This bill creates a funding policy in statute using fixed employee contributions and an actuarially determined employer contribution rate using a corridor. The structure is similar to the other two Austin pension systems and is similar to the structure used for the Houston systems. Other adjustments to benefits occurred in HB 2802. After 30 years, ad hoc COLAs would be permitted only if the system would remain 100% funded. And it also adds a new benefit tier, Group B, which would be created for new hires starting on or after January 1st, 2026. The bill also adds 2 additional city-appointed board members who must be 5-year city residents with investment or financial experience. The board members also the board terms increase to 4 years, and the mayor is no longer the ex officio chair. Austin Fire is intending to submit a voluntary funding soundness restoration plan to the PRB in the near future using the provisions of this bill. Next slide. The final bill we're going to highlight in this presentation is HB 2688 by Representative Harless, which focuses on the Houston systems, Houston Firefighters Relief and Retirement Fund, and Houston Police Officers Pension System. The bill changes the cost method from ultimate entry age normal to entry age normal. For both systems Tier 2, the bill expands drop eligibility, and Houston Fire members also receive an optional drop if they have between 10 and 20 years of service. For Houston Fire members, the normal retirement age changes to the earlier of 20 years of service or age 50 with 10 years of service for all members. And for our Houston Police, the normal retirement age is changed to earlier of 20 years or age 60 with 10 years of service for all members. And that concludes my presentation. Summaries of all the pension bills are included in your packet, and a bill tracking report is available on our website on the 89th legislative session page. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions from board members? Okay, we'll move on to 7B, which is the general government legislation.
All right. Good afternoon, members. Ashley Rendon, Deputy Director. For this item, I'll be presenting on bills that generally affect state agencies. Next slide. This session, the PRB tracked 263 bills spanning a range of topics, including state agency oversight, open government, rulemaking, personnel and HR, and IT data and cybersecurity. Of these bills, 27 passed and became law. In this presentation, I will cover the key general government bills that passed, particularly those that would have a significant impact on the PRB. Your packet includes additional summaries of these bills and some that I will not cover in the presentation unless you have questions. Next slide. So first, House Bill 12 made a number of modifications to the sunset review process. As a reminder, the PRB sunset date is September 1st, 2029. Which means we will undergo sunset review during fiscal years 28-29, leading up to the 91st legislative session in 2029. House Bill 12 also creates a new requirement for the State Auditor's Office to conduct efficiency audits of agencies 4 years before their sunset review. This means that the PRB will undergo such an audit during fiscal years 26 and 27. An efficiency audit looks at whether an agency's use of resources, reports, and programs are efficient and effective. The bill requires agencies to pay the cost of their efficiency audit and authorizes the State Auditor's Office to contract out for audit services. We do not have details on the expected cost at this time, but are keeping this in mind as we develop our next budget. The State Auditor's Office is required to adopt a schedule for the first round of reviews by January 1st, 2026. Once the State Auditor's Office has conducted its audit, it is required to submit its report by November 1st of that year, and the agency has 90 days to submit an implementation plan. We will keep the board updated on the timeline for this audit and our response. Next slide. The legislature passed several open government bills, including Public Information Act and Open Meetings Act. I'll just cover one of these bills. All right. So House Bill 4219 modifies the Public Information Act to create an express requirement that governmental bodies notify requesters in writing within 10 business days if the body does not hold information responsive to a request, or if the information requested is subject to a previous determination by the Office of the Attorney General that permits the body to withhold the information. The bill also authorizes requesters to submit a complaint to the Attorney General's office if a governmental body fails to respond to a request, and authorizes the Attorney General's office to require the body's public information officer to complete additional Information Act training, prohibit the governmental body from assessing costs for the request, and creates expedited time requirements for responding to the request. Next slide. Senate Bill 14 pertains to rulemaking. The bill creates the Texas Regulatory Efficiency Office within the Office of the Governor to improve efficiency in rulemaking. The bill also creates the Texas Regulatory Efficiency Advisory Panel. The bill requires that an agency's proposed rules be written in plain language. Agencies must also include a request for information related to the cost, benefit, or effect of the proposed rule from any interested person. The bill specifies that courts are not required to give deference to a state agency's legal determination regarding the law or a rule adopted by the state agency. Next slide. The legislature passed several IT data and cybersecurity bills this session, and I will just touch on a few. First, House Bill 149 creates numerous requirements and prohibitions for the use of artificial intelligence, we all know it's AI, by governmental entities. The bill creates a state AI council and requires the council to provide AI training for state agencies and local governments. The bill also requires the Department of Information Resources, or DIR, to collect information from state agencies on their use of AI systems as part of DIR's existing reporting and review requirements. Next, House Bill 150 creates the Texas Cyber Command to prevent and respond to cybersecurity incidents for the state. The Cyber Command will assume cybersecurity roles currently assigned to DIR, and state agencies will work with the command to complete existing requirements such as annual cybersecurity training, incident reporting, and deploying cybersecurity measures. Next slide. House Bill 5195 requires agencies to conduct assessments of their websites and online portals to improve digital modernization, such as accessibility, navigation, and efficiency. DIR will assist agencies on this process and report to the legislature in 2026 on agencies' efforts under this bill. Agencies will biennially review their digital modernization in coordination with DIR and the Legislative Budget Board, and DIR will report biennially on any findings. So that concludes my presentation under this item, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from board members? Very well, we'll move on to 7C, which is the PRB budget appropriations for fiscal years 26 and 27.
Great, thank you. So last year, we put together our legislative appropriations request. Sorry, Brian, next slide. Which included four exceptional items. This session, all four of them were given, we got all four of them funded through two bills. The first, Senate Bill 1, or the General Appropriations Act, is the base budget bill, which is effective September 1st of this year, covering fiscal years 2026 and 27. So included in that was our ask for additional money to provide merit increases for our staff, an IT maintenance budget, which we really didn't have before, so it's really great that we can have that budget, and I'll get into that a little bit more on my next presentation. And then additional money to increase the executive director's salary. Under House Bill 500, that's the supplemental appropriations bill, we were given one-time money for IT enhancements. The supplemental appropriations bill is effective once signed by the governor, which I believe was June 22nd. So we have 2 years from that date to use that money. And so that's really good news because we're able to start on those projects pretty quickly. And that's all I have for this item. If there are no questions, I'm happy to move on to the next item.
Any questions from board members? Very good. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is the IT project updates.
All right. So for IT projects, I will start with some background. So next slide, please. Again, our appropriations request included an exceptional item for technology, which fell into two main buckets. One was to establish an ongoing budget for things like software licenses and monthly maintenance, and the other was for one-time money to use for projects and IT equipment. Next slide. Senate Bill 1 provided $80,000 for the biennium for those for subscriptions and IT maintenance. So think if something broke and we needed it to be fixed, we can use that budget. House Bill 500 provided the one-time money, which is $700,000 for the 2-year period beginning in June. Next slide. If you recall, over the last few years, we've really focused on two main IT systems: the internal database, which stores all of our critical data that we receive from pension systems through their reporting, and then the pension online reporting tool, or the portal. We also maintain in-house a few other systems, such as the data center, the online data center, the education website, where we provide our online courses, and our main website. So our focus over the next couple of years will be to essentially move to a next phase of those systems. We'll prioritize the changes we need to make to the education module as part of the rule implementation after the education program overhaul. And then we'll be hoping to make connections between those systems to enhance staff and user experience, make more information readily available to the public, with a goal of increasing transparency. Next slide. We've already started work on these projects. This spring, we began internal meetings to prioritize tasks and start scoping out the projects. And later this summer, we'll meet with our IT consultant to really outline the project and get a better idea of what we can achieve in the next 2 years. And later this year, we'll begin the actual work, the programming, and we do anticipate these projects will take us through to mid-2027, but we will definitely keep you all updated as we make progress. And that's all I have for this item. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Very good. Thank you, Ms. Rendon. We will move now to agenda item number 9, which is our executive director report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Amy Cardona, the Executive Director of the Pension Review Board. Item 9 consists of 2 budget items. Item 9A is just an update of our fiscal year 25 operating budget, and it represents the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. We're on track to finish the fiscal year with a little bit of breathing room, so we're happy about that. 9B, I believe the chair wishes to take that item up after item 10. 9B is the possible board adoption of the fiscal year 26 operating budget for the agency. That concludes my remarks on the executive director's report.
Any questions at this time? As Amy indicated, we will take up official action on 2026 budget after we do executive session, and that does bring us to agenda item number 10, which is executive session. So in accordance with section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code, the board will meet in executive session to discuss personnel matters, including the evaluation, compensation, and performance of the executive director. It is now 12:29 p.m. on July 10th. At this time, Pension Review Board will go into closed session to discuss personnel matters listed under action item number 10. All board members will move into this room adjacent to us, and we ask that Tony and Ashley join us in that room. Time is now 12:47. The board is back in open session. No action was taken in closed section, but we will have an action item related to our closed session discussions. Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion to increase the salary of the executive director to $156,240 effective September 1, 2025, and to $164,240 effective September 1, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Dush, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez, to increase the salary of the executive director to $156,240 effective September 1, 2025, and $164,240 effective September 1, 2026. Any discussion from the board?
I would only say that this motion is intended to reflect the board's tremendous satisfaction with the performance of the executive director.
Here, totally agree.
Agreed.
Yes, I will echo that. Amy, I think we've all appreciated the leadership that you've provided to the agency. We understand the task that you had before you as you came on board. I know that the path that you've blazed is not the path that was intended, but we all admire the work that you've done, and we're definitely appreciative of everything that you've provided to the agency.
It's my honor to serve the board.
All in favor of the motion say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and salary increase has been approved. At this time, we will go back to action item 9B, which is approval of the agency's fiscal year 2026 operating budget. Is there anything that you wanted to highlight or provide in relation to the budget?
Yeah, I'll just say that this is our fiscal year 26 operating budget. It really just reflects the amounts that we received through the appropriations process this time around. And, you know, some more detailed internal budgeting. So, yeah.
Okay. And again, just would like to thank Amy and staff, as we noted prior in today's board meeting, all the exceptional items that the agency requested in relation to the legislative appropriation request were granted. And I think that speaks very highly about the faith that legislature currently has in the job performance of staff and the work product that's coming out of the agency. So for all staff members, I say thank you for that. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 operating budget, which is reflected to reflect the increased executive director salary that the board just passed. Can I get a
I'm happy to
motion?
make that motion. It's Daniel.
Second.
Perfect. A motion has been made by Mr. Harper, seconded by Mrs. Dush, to approve the fiscal year 2026 operating budget. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the fiscal year 2026 operating budget is approved as updated. We do have an education committee meeting today at 2 o'clock in this room. Remaining board meetings will take place September 2025, December 11, 2025, with locations to be determined. PRB website will be updated with information on meeting locations. and if any additional board or committee meetings are scheduled. Do the board members have any agenda items that they'd like to place on future agendas? Very good. There being no further meeting or business of the board and no objection, I move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.